If they get crossed again, then their next life is as something of an insect. If they get crossed again, then their next life is something like a tree. And so, as we talked about, the Knights of Malta told the Catholics, you may have the cross, but we have the true meaning to the cross, because they understood what you'll see here on the currency, which is the use of the double cross, which is the symbol of, or the mark of Cain. It's known that in the Old Testament that Cain was given a mark to roam throughout the land so that he could not be conquered by his father, that mark was given to him by his father, which we now know to be part of the serpent god faction. And it's very important here to realize that to say that all serpents are evil is just as silly as saying that all humans are good, because there is a large part of the human being, as they call it, the Homo sapien, and sapien means serpent, or the reptilian portion of the brain, which is actually a hack into the brain, changing the consciousness of the brain, that there's definitely been some involvement with some type of hyperdimensional beings. However, the human being is exactly that. They are hyperdimensional. And when I saw my hyperdimensional self, I saw that my mind and my heart was controlling which dimension I was in. And that because this one had been thought about and I had been binded to it so much, then it became a problem for me to realize that I was hyperdimensional. And how this binding takes place is very similar, it's very close to with trees and ropes and ties. If you notice that on just about every single city or country or state or continent's currency, you will at times find a tree associated with it. Not just the tree that it's written on, but also maybe a state or county seal of a tree. And also when reading into the deeper Masonic encyclopedias, we find that every single degree is associated with a different tree. And this is because of an ancient secret that few will lend you time to tell, but it is about the association between snakes and trees. That somewhere in the evolution, or whatever you want to call it, of this grand creation, snakes end up being trees or trees end up being snakes. And what you're actually looking at with the branches is the tentacles. In fact, there are many different beings that seem to exist one or two levels below us that actually simply use tentacles. They have no face. They use the tentacle to feel about and feel things. And so this relationship is also what they're attempting to capture in Genesis, although they're not alluding to you what exactly is going on, but they talk about Eve and this tree being somehow joined together in the beginning of the fall of mankind, as they're calling it, which is actually a staged plan, not something that mankind is doing on its own, but a way in which to cause us to fall. And you will see that here with the currency, that there's a perpetrator that is attempting to link us all in with it as we continue just to try to survive. And this happens with money. So there are generally two serpents shown on the pole, which gives us the Caduceus rod. It's important to identify what those two serpents are, and there's been a lot of debate here these days in trying to discover what exactly these two serpents are about. Many have alluded that this is Kundalini, that Kundalini should rise from the base of the spine into the brain, and then that activates a person. And I found that this may not be entirely true, that it's more like that there is an energy that rests in the head, and it must come down, or what they call descend like a dove, from the head into the center solar plexus or heart area, while there is another energy that must come from below, and it must go all the way up and then meet at the same place. So these two must meet in the middle. It's not that one goes to the other. And when those two meet, then it causes an activation of Kundalini, thus ruling out the Caduceus staff as an actual symbol of Kundalini, save that it's an individual who has the two serpents risen into their brain, thus controlling their thought and everything that they're about. And we find that this may be true because when looking at a great deal of the Egyptian symbolism and the symbolism from many other tribes, such as the Indonesian, those that understand the Naga or worship the Naga, etc., that they keep these serpents on the crown of their on the top of their crowns, symbolizing that it's simply remaining in their mind and in their head, not cycling. So it's important to pull apart some of the symbolism and exactly what it means. In addition to that, if we notice with the dollar sign, which is actually your number 4 on your computer keyboard, you will notice that there is only one stick going through it. And this has been changed from the original 2 sticks going through it. And this is because there was always knowledge that one of those serpents were poisonous, as we talked about on the previous show. And that one of those serpents wasn't as harmful as the other, but again, you're still dealing with serpentine energy, and there's a great deal of power and a great deal of responsibility that comes with such things. And we have now more recordings of individuals that have failed with it than individuals that have actually progressed with it. But this is, I guess, maybe a work in progress itself for humanity to when they will stop falling under the same tricks and spells. Because what's happening is that when they show that one serpent or one stick, they're showing that is, or the one S around the stick, that is simply showing that they're using the poisonous one. And so that becomes the tune of money, is that whoever is choosing to put it out is not putting any type of balance component with it at all and has no interest in doing that. And so to recap, the 8-pointed star is of Ishtar. The word Ishtar can just be looked at as Ishtar, but that IS is where you get your dollar sign from. Ishtar is also Ashtar and many other names, but mainly known as Isis. And if everyone pretty much knows at this point that's in the occult circle, that when you compress the name Isis into one symbol, it makes a dollar sign. So this shows you further that a great deal of these 8-pointed stars that you're seeing and this connection to Isis is alive and on deck. And so I'm going to read an excerpt here that gives you more of a clarity on why the kings and the queens and things of this nature, tribal leaders, etc. of this world became intrigued by this being, and ultimately it's causing the demise of our world. So of course, in identifying it, that would actually reverse the cycle and allow people to regroup. So I'm pulling up one particular excerpt, and I'll have Pablo pull that up on the screen also on live stream for those that have not tuned into that. It's www.livestream.com/understanding. And he's going to pull up the excerpt called The Origins of Ishtar, and I will read it very briefly here. And it says, on the one hand, therefore, Ishtar was depicted as a heralded, naked goddess, and on the other as heroine and queen. The goddess is the spouse and lover of the king, and whom she participates in the ritual of a sacred marriage. She provides the king with economic blessings, as well as power and victory in war. Inanna Ishtar is associated with the cults of many cities. She is particularly prominent in Uruk, Akkad, Kish, Nineveh, and Arabella. In Uruk, but particularly in Akkad and Assyria, she is a goddess of war and victory. In Mesopotamian literary texts, Inanna Ishtar has a coherent and believable, if complex, personality. Inanna Ishtar is a young, independent, and willful woman of the urban class. She is a product of an urban world and is closely associated with cities more than with cosmic functions. Now, I want to stop here because I just keep seeing Beyonce. The idea of a very independent, upper-class woman, but how that woman is nowhere near connected to what the earth and what the earth is all about, because she is not connected to the cosmic functions, but more of just the functions that take place within cities. So, I continue to read. It says, she seems to be constantly on the move, perhaps because of her association with heavenly bodies and unencumbered women. And what this means is that many in the heavens have taken Ishtar ideas and Inanna type ideas and made them a part of their own, and then that also would make them restless and discontent. And thus is her character also. And as it continues, it says here, Inanna Ishtar often appears as a sexually attractive being, but she remains unsatisfied and is constantly injured, striving and contentious. She tends toward anger and rage and troubles heaven and earth. One is tempted to talk of early psychic wounds. So regardless of how much the world wants to remain in denial, what we find when we read texts such as these is not just someone to point the finger at, but actually characters and traits that reside within ourselves because of our affiliation with this type of behavior. Because ultimately, as you've seen, that money becomes the lowering of a person's morals, especially a woman. And many women have been, if you want to call it, forced to take money in lieu of sexual desires and pleasures and things of that nature. And even men that she's not wanted to have as her consort, she's chosen as her consort because of the money that the individual has. But to understand also that a great deal of the archetype of women, which comes from Venus, was already engaged in such practices, and because the archetype was doing it, that energy is bleeding into the reality. Just as the energy of thought, the Hermes, who is also androgynous, is bleeding into our reality because of the affiliations that people are making that they don't know about at this point because they've been doing it for so long. It's coming under the guise of money now, but several lifetimes it's come under different guises, a false currency, something that is supposed to be giving us energy, but in all actuality is actually dead, a withered tree, and should not be giving us any type of satisfaction. So thus, because we fooled ourselves to believe that satisfaction will come from it, then we put ourselves in quite a bind. Again, this is the way to get out. So the meaning of the two serpents on the dollar, or the two serpents on the Caduceus staff, was only that of the deities known as Ishtar and Anat, who you don't really hear much about, but you just hear under the name An. And all these beings are moon gods. In fact, they say here that Nanar Sin, which is the Sumerian name for the moon, gave birth to Venus. And there's an affiliation and connection between Venus and Hermes and the moon. In addition to that, to understand the Sumerian, the name Anu also means the moon. So the word Anunnaki means the moon. The word El was generally given as a term to mean the moon because El is more like a title. If you say El, you could be talking about anything. It's not specific. But if you go into the angles or the angels of the moon, then you find that the angels are actually stationed on the moon waiting to be dispatched. So that's why in certain songs as J Electronica, the Loving the Stars, they're touting or touting the elves are coming. As you see in the comment El Nin, Nin only means Ishtar, so it would mean the Lord Nin is coming. And many people are afraid because this to them symbolizes some type of disaster. However, we've already touted once and for all at the Resistance that we can avoid such disasters by knowing what's exactly happening. So there is an esoteric nature to money that is continuously being upgraded. Understand that the first money that came out was really made of coins. And that word is synonymous with Cain. Cain and coin are the same word. Coin and Cohen, or the Hebrew word for priest, is the same word. And this word means king. So this is the priest king. So the priest kings carrying ox, which is A-N-K-H, which is the anagram for the word Khan, that's K-H-A-N. The ox, or those who carried the ox, were conning the individuals that they were coming upon with their alchemy. Because the alchemy of money is what we are really getting into today, which is how is it that something that has no value becomes of great value. Remember, the whole art of alchemy is that of turning dirt into